And thank you for joining us once again here on PM Express. As you know, we are approaching a very important time when it comes to the education sector. We've been talking about free SHS for a while. The government is now preparing a bill to be submitted to Parliament. We're now learning a bit more about the specifics, and after what we now know to be some 6 years since the bill itself was passed, the government is about now to put it before the House for a debate. Some details of it have emerged, and we are putting together the team to look at it. The consultations that must happen before that bill goes to the House is critical, especially in an election year. We don't want to wait, especially now we've learned that the Education Minister is sending this to Cabinet for consideration, just to see it finally out, and then the debate starts. And that is why we are putting a few stakeholders together tonight to have a conversation about that based on what we know so far. It's almost, as you see there, some 7 years since implementation started. The government believes it is now time to have legislation that will compel successive governments to implement it. And we're beginning to learn a few more details about this. These changes that the Education Minister has been talking about, speaking to the graphic, by the way, in putting out some of the details that we can expect to be in this particular legislation. One of the first things that we know he had said we can expect is the SHS certification that we know happens. That will become that first leg when it comes to your qualification certification to progress into the tertiary institutions. And so there's going to be a decoupling of the junior high school from the basic level, and it's going to now be part of the senior high school. And so we're now going to have a 6-year educational system. If you get into what you will now become, previously the junior high school, they want to scrap that. Another thing they want to scrap is the, again, something that we learned again from that interview, is that they also want to scrap the BECE. The Basic Education Certificate Examination will also be scrapped. What would that mean? That will mean, in essence, that the junior high school and to the secondary school will now be 6 years. And that is a fundamental change. But then also, this issue that we've had where after the BECE, some students are unable to progress into the senior high school. The government says they want to change and tweak the law a bit so that doesn't become a hindrance anymore. It'll just become a basis for the selection of schools and not a basis for sort of determining which students go through to the senior high school and which students do not. So those are very important 3 fundamental points that we learned from that interview that Education Minister gave the graphic on what the bill will look like. But there are big questions that must be addressed. Beyond those 2 issues, as in decoupling this, basic school, which includes the junior high school, and adding it to the senior high school, so we have the 6-year period, and also canceling the BECE, the Basic Education Certificate Examination. Beyond those 2, there are fundamental issues that have bedeviled and rocked the free SHS that you expect any piece of legislation to deal with. One is funding. And we expect that this bill must definitely address and define the funding source. So far, the funding source hasn't been clearly defined. We know that they've taken from the oil funds that we make, and of course, in terms of the oil the legislative architecture itself, government will have to decide after every set period where those funds will be spent. And education has been a key area for the government, defining that area. And so they've taken quite some amount of money from there. But you need to define that in the law, which is something that we expect to happen. And then you look at infrastructure. If you're defining where that funding is coming from, what do you use it on? Again, the law must give some guidance on this particular issue of infrastructure, which is a key matter. Will the law address that, for example? Will the law address the issues about the long vacation periods? Because it's an infrastructure challenge. If you deal with that, then you have more space to have the enlarging enrollment and the people going indeed into the senior high schools, someplace that they can study. Feeding has been an issue. And all that really comes down to the funding issue. So you expect the law to look at that also. Now, the IMF itself gave us some indication as to what they're expecting us to look at when it comes to the free SHS. They talked about the policy is poorly targeted. Will this law specify who should benefit from the free SHS program? It's another key question that we must ask. And as you know, going way back to the time it was first, the attempts were made to implement it, the then finance minister had argued that he believes targeting this a bit more, making it based really on needs assessment. Will the law propose that, and should it? My guess will weigh in on that when we sit for conversation. Learning outcomes too, what would he say about that? Would it be focused more on quantity, as in enrollment, or it'll be more oriented towards improving quality? Then you talk about need for better teacher training. Will they specify the quality of teachers, indeed the minimum qualifications teachers will need if you want to be part of this new 6-year period that indeed it will be encapsulated in the law? That was the IMF own point, right? And will government take from that lesson that the IMF own evaluation of this and use that, for example, to carve the law? It's a key thing. But one of the key things that you also need to address, and government has seen this as a positive, the increasing enrollment all the way from 300,000 in the senior high schools to 500,000 is what we've seen, an increase of more than just around 200,000 people more now are going to the senior high schools because it's free. As it increases, and the projection, if you see, the trend is that it's going to continue, is the funding issues become an issue, the accommodation becomes an issue, space becomes an issue. We've improved access significantly, and you then need to address the challenges that will bring. The key question then becomes, will the law be strong enough to deal with these challenges that we expect will come? So these are very important issues. As I say, a lot of it has come down to the funding, and 16.65 billion cedis is what we've spent so far on this. You need far more as the enrollment numbers go up. Whichever government takes over from the free SHS will have to spend a bit more, as the projection says. You can expect the enrollment to go up. And you see how it's fluctuated in terms of the allocations that government has been putting into the free SHS all the way. Now, it was higher in 2023 at 2.95 billion and has dropped slightly to 2.76 billion. You need it to be sustainable. You need it to be sustainable. That's the law, address that. If it should address that, what do you expect to be in this law beyond what we now have heard from the education minister? My guess will weigh in on that particular conversation also when we sit for a conversation. And then you look at the average WASSCE pass rate. And this is the issue of quality. Is it right to only assess quality on the basis of how students perform in the West Africa Senior High School certificate examination? My guess, who know better than I do, will answer that question. But if you look at the trend, at least from 2021, it's been climbing up. Students are performing much, much better, all the way to 69.75% is what we're seeing now from a low of 52%. So that, for the government, is a great indicator of quality, but is it? And will a law, for example, lay the legal basis for this to even improve further? Is a key question. NDC already, they possibly could be the government 2025. And if this law is passed, it is something that they will have to implement and enforce. What is their position? The General Secretary was on PM Express a couple of weeks back, and he said a few things. One, they are not opposed to the bill, but they believe the condition is it must address and prioritize quality. And for them, if the bill addresses that subject, they will support it. They don't want it to become an instrument to protect the legacy of the current president. They need it to be one that addresses quality. So really, how do you couch and craft a law to deliver that so that the NDC can bind to it? Big question indeed tonight. And my guests will weigh in after this. Stay with me. Syntax tanks, it is strong, it is tough, and I always recommend Syntax tanks to you every evening because it's a tank that has the 7 years warranty. Nobody else has that, and it comes bespoke, and you want to call them because they are across the country. 0244 335 is the telephone line, 0244 335 168, or shop online at syntexgh.com. And Syntax tanks, it is strong, it is tough. My guest joining me tonight for a conversation is you know him, Kofi Asare is one that we speak to quite often on these matters because he knows what he's talking about. Reverend Isaac Owusu is the national president of the Ghana National Association of Teachers, NAT. They are an important stakeholder in this particular matter. We'll also be joined by a member on the Education Committee on the side of the minority, the deputy ranking member, indeed, Dr. Clement Park, and he's articulating the position of the minority in Parliament, and they're key stakeholders in this as well. Kofi Asare, as I said, is Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch, also joins us for a conversation, and Professor Stephen Adai is an educationist. You know him, has run institutions up and down this country, and knows quite a bit about this area, and I want to bring him in first. Prof, thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for joining me here on PM Extra. Prof, let me start with you. Let's start with the basic question. Do we need a free SHS law? Hello, Professor Adai.
Hello.
Great to have you join us. I'm delighted that you can join us. I wanted to start by asking your thought on the fundamental question. The assumption I believe that government is proceeding with is that a free SHS law is needed. Do we need a free SHS law?
Well, are they saying that all the 7 years they have been illegal?
Well,
so there's no doubt at all that this thing, they have practiced it for 7 years. If they feel that there's a need for a law now, so be it. But what they have done for the past 7 years has not been illegal. It has been by government policy. It's acceptable. So they must have a reason why they want to bring in a law now. So far, what is being said that so that future governments cannot torpedo it, I don't think that is here and there. The same way you brought it, another government with majority can also change it. So I think that the free SHS is good policy, has to be attuned, and I don't think that any government would say now some Ghanaians should not have education, but it's a question of how best to attune it. I think the main issue is not the legalities. The main issue is the practical implementation. But I find the whole discussion a bit funny.
okay.
The government would like us to discuss policy they want to bring it by the minister just throwing things into the public domain. If you want to review the SHS, let the experts and ordinary Ghanaians have opportunity. Let's discuss it and how best to go about it. But you don't just say that there's going to be legislation and then go to graphic and give snaps here and there. I've been in public service all my life until retirement. This is a very weird way of doing policy, but it is the young people's time. So the young people may tell me if that's the way to do policy. I find it weird.
Yeah, I mean, interesting thoughts there. And I want to bring in a very important stakeholder, the Ghana National Association of Teachers. Yeah, national president is with us on the show also. Reverend Owusu, give me your thoughts on what you just heard Professor Stephen Adai say there about the need for the law, but also the approach.
Well, Evans, a very good evening to your good self and your viewers. And let me say a good evening to my senior brothers, Kofi Asare and Prof. You see, I am wondering, Evans, to the best of my knowledge, we have not seen the content of the proposed bill.
Before we come to the content, I'm asking the fundamental question: do we need a law? Would you say?
No, we already have the law. You see, currently, if you look at Act 1049, which is for Pre-Tertiary Education Act. If you look at Section 1, Section 2, and 3, the 3 is specific, which talks about free secondary education. Secondary education in its different forms, including technical and vocational education, shall be free and accessible to all eligible candidates. So we already have the law. Act 1049. So that is why I'm saying that, to the best of my knowledge, for us, some of us are not privy to the content of the proposed bill that the minister is sending to Parliament. Is it that you want to give extensive, comprehensive legislation on pre-secondary school, or you want to amend the entire pre-tertiary education system? Because the current act, which was passed by the same Parliament, has spelled out the pre-tertiary education system. If you look at it, Section 1, it says that the system of pre-tertiary education shall consist of A, basic education, which comprises 2 years of kindergarten, 6 years of primary school, and 3 years of junior high school, and then secondary education, which shall comprise 3 years of senior high school, 3 years of technical and vocational education, and training. So this is the law. So I don't know whether the minister wants to introduce a legislative instrument to amend Act 1049, or he's bringing a new law solely based on the free secondary school.
Okay, because what you said is so important, Reverend. Stay with me, because I want to expand on that point with Kofi Asare. Kofi, Reverend makes an important point in reading the act that currently exists. Let's go to the graphic interview. One of the key proposed, changes we may see in the act, according to the minister in the interview with the graphic, is to yank the junior high school from the basic education as defined in the law as it exists currently and make it part of the secondary school. So you have a 6-year education period. That, of course, then becomes a new sort of system with education structure that you implement under a new law. What do you make of that vis-a-vis the law that currently exists?
Good evening. I don't think that's new. It's not new. It's already been implemented.
With the backing of the law? With the backing of the law?
It is not. I thought you said we should depart from the law, because I wanted to make a point on the law.
Yeah.
You see, it is in the secondary education strategy. It is not to increase senior high school education to 6 years. Mm-hmm. It is to increase secondary education to 6 years. The meaning is not to say that senior high school will be Form 1 to Form 6. No. But it's simply to say that the junior high school, which is physically attached to the basic school, will now run content akin to secondary school. So that the junior high school will now be seen more as a junior secondary school than, if you like, a senior primary school. So content, learning attainment, and all the other related learning outcomes at the junior high school level will be structured more in line with that of secondary education than basic education. That is what it's doing. And the new curriculum that is currently being run in junior high schools, which you call the Common Core, has all that. It has all that core competencies of digital literacy, of collaboration and coordination, all the critical thinking, and all the core competencies of the common core curriculum, which is the junior high school curriculum today, are aligned more to secondary education than basic. So that is the 6-year thing. It is not a structural attachment. It's not a physical attachment of junior high school to senior high school, but in terms of the content. So it's already in policy. It's been implemented. We've been doing the common core for 3 years now. The first batch is writing BEC a week or so from now, and so it's already been implemented.
So do I hear you say that any law, as has been now proposed and articulated by the minister, that writes this into an act will be in form only, not in substance, because in substance it's already happening?
The structure of the pre-tertiary education system is already in law. It's in the pre-tertiary education law, which Nana Akufo-Addo, His Excellency, passed and signed on 29 December 2020. Act 1049 has the structure of the pre-tertiary education system, which includes basic and secondary education and TVET. So the structure is there.
But Kofi, if you read the graphic interview, the minister seemed to suggest that once this law is passed, you will cease to have the junior high school nomenclature, will cease. And then you will have only the secondary school.
Yeah, so you can choose to call the junior high school a junior secondary school. But we all know that when President Kufuor was changing junior secondary school to junior high school, it didn't go through law. It wasn't a series of... You see, laws provide legal, institutional, and regulatory frameworks for the enforcement of rights. Policies provide the operational frameworks for the implementation of these rights as encapsulated in law. So the things we are discussing are not legal issues. They are all policy issues. Basic education, the structure of basic education and secondary education is already in law, in the pre-tertiary education law. Okay. If you want to redefine that, all you need to do is to go and amend the pre-tertiary education law. If you want to clarify it, all you need to do is to develop an LI for the pre-tertiary education law, which the government has passed. It's very, very simple. But I am saying that the things we are discussing relating to the structure and content and objective of secondary education is already in the secondary education strategy. And
so let me ask you then that question I started with. For you, do we need this law?
No, we already have a law that commits the state to implementing free secondary education. Section 3 of Act 1049, which President Akufo-Addo passed, provides for free secondary and TVET education in Ghana. And so does Section 2 provide for free compulsory universal basic education. That is the only law for the enforcement of education rights under 13(2) or 25(1).
But that
beyond that, what we need is a legislative instrument to properly operationalize the pre-tertiary education law, which President Akufo-Addo has passed.
Okay, stay with me, Kofi. I want to go back very, very briefly to Reverend Owusu, of course, who is the president of NAT, for a quick question. Reverend, just so I get you clearly, you started by quoting the existing act. Is it your position then that we don't need another law as is being proposed by the minister?
Oh, it was, as Kofi rightly said, we already have the existing law.
Okay.
So it's either you are bringing an ally to give more clarification on how we should implement the free secondary school, but you cannot say that you are bringing a proposed new bill. That's why I'm asking: is it going to replace the Act 1049, or is it going to stand on its own? The Act 1049 talks about pre-tertiary education, which includes secondary education. So maybe until we see the content, then we will understand the minister. But looking at what the graphic reportage, it's like a political talk that somebody is entertaining fear. That if a party A comes and because it is not compulsory, somebody can throw it away. Of course, you know the two parties, you know them, NDC, MPP. When Kufuor set up Professor Anamwa's a committee to bring the reform, secondary education was moved from 3 years to 4 years. And the late Atamis in his manifesto, promised Ghanaians that if I come to power, I'll bring it back to 3 years. So they know the game they are playing. But when it comes to educational issues, they should leave politics out of it and get the experts to guide them and advise them accordingly. That is all that we are saying.
Okay, let me come back to Professor Stephen Adai then. Prof, you started the conversation, laid it for us to appreciate your position. Now, if you go back to the substance of what the minister is proposing, though, I wonder what your take is on this. One, that they are going to cancel the basic education certificate examination as it is right now, so that even when you write it, it is only for you to sort of select your secondary schools and not as a barrier for entry. So that's the first thing they said. And then the second point is what the Nat and Kofi have just debated, which is decoupling the junior high school from the basic school and making it part of the secondary school, thereby creating this 6-year secondary education. Please give me your thoughts on this proposed details that may be in the law, as the minister says.
Well, I must say that as someone who has been in the education field for a good part of my life, not all my life, and watching things for the past 75 years of my life, I find all these discussions a bit funny and unusual. And I don't know what the minister is aiming at to achieve in throwing this into the public domain. Because policy, you may say that we want to look at the free SHS and see how we can improve it, and then have forum, the experts come in, we discuss it. Now you say you have prepared a bill, a law to go to parliament, and then you sneak out certain aspects of it. I think that it is a bad way of going about it. Nevertheless, back to your question. I actually co-founded a secondary school, and we have 2 branches, one in my village and one near Dodowa. To be honest with you, we don't do BEC in the school. The reason is that we didn't see it necessary. Secondly, the first time we attempted to do it, there was so much cheating going on because our children would not take part in it. They were so insulted by the invigilators and by everybody else. We had to bring in clinical psychologists to come and calm them. And I said that for goodness sake, so for years, that's about 13 years, our children don't do BEC at Sota near Dodowa at all. So something must be done about the BEC, and not so much as to, because you can't, it's not terminal. What are you going to do with it and yet it has so much implications. In one village, 1 week, we still do it because they were on that they wouldn't get into public secondary schools, whilst here it's a continuous 6 years. So we have been practicing the 6 years and already in one school and not the other. So for me, if you have free secondary school and you will get everybody should go there, as it is happening in America, in Britain, where you terminate school at 18, you don't need it, but you must have a certain assessment, which they will try to introduce, I think, in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, and that assessment can be the selection process, and it can be all right. My concern is this. There's too much tinkering in pre-university education, and what is there, instead of our seeing to how we can improve it, you are now bringing in structural changes. You are already doing syllabi changes, which we don't know where it is going. Now you want to change the structure. Are you going to? And we are being told that it's not actually, it's a matter of the content. And if that is the case, what is the law going to do? Because the content is being taken care of already and being implemented. So really, I'm baffled. I don't know what is, and discussing it without the law being put before Parliament so that we can address it at this snapshot is unnecessary discussions and agitations. These teachers are now, instead of concentrating on preparing their children for the BCE and WASI, when they have 2 weeks to go, you throw this into the air. This is not acceptable. In Cree, we say,
And Prof, stay with me. Stay with me. I mean, and this is really the reason why this conversation is important, because already the government is going ahead, is going to go to cabinet, as has been proposed already, and will end up on the floor of Parliament. This has already been debated among parliamentarians, and I want to bring in one of them. He's a deputy ranking on the Education Committee in Parliament. That's Clement Apak, Dr. Clement Apak. He will join us pretty shortly because he's writing on this today, putting forth the minority position on the matter. He will join us pretty shortly to hear what their thoughts are on this. But Kofi, I want to come back to you, right? If you listen to Professor Dyer there, he almost takes the position that you take too. I mean, he believes this is the approach is even wrong. But government believes this must happen. Majority Leader first announced it. Education Minister is giving interviews on it. It's going to go to cabinet. You can bet it will come to the House. You're a civil society. Are you seeking to try and understand what is happening, to try and make input? Because politicians are moving. This train has moved. Or what's the approach you're taking at Africa Education Watch?
CSOs have already mobilized. We are waiting for the bill to be laid. And once it is laid, we hope that it is not laid under a certificate of emergency, so that we can have some 1 week or 2 weeks to do a surgical knife review of the bill, and then on the basis of that, make recommendations to the Ministry of Education. Alternatively, if it is packaged and rushed through under a certificate of emergency, we have an alternative plan to convene immediately, and then do a quick review and advise government accordingly. But for now, we have not been consulted. No CSO is part of the deliberation. We have not seen the bill, and so we will wait until the government lays the bill on the floor.
Let me then ask you, knowing that this is something the government is actively working at, if this is going to come to Parliament, what must it address? What are the key, most important, critical issues that any policy the government seeks to turn into an act to make it binding, whether it is an LI or a law? What are the key issues that it must address?
I have said that it is very new and alien to my understanding of how education systems work in Africa and South America, that you find a country that has an education law, which is a broad one, and then has a secondary education law. No country has that. If you go everywhere in the world, you will find two models. Model one is an education law governing the entire education sector, like South Africa. And then the second model is an education law, which is a foundational law for all educational rights. And then you have one specific one for basic education, which is the fundamental right. And that is what you have in Kenya, you have in Nigeria, and then other countries, Zambia. So we will be the first country in the world where we have a general education law, it's a tertiary education law, and we have no law for basic education, We have no policy for basic education, but we have a law for secondary education and a policy for secondary education. I'll be surprised if it goes this way. My recommendation is that the best way to ensure that the proper institutional arrangement, regulatory arrangement, funding arrangement, all the operational frameworks required to sustain the free senior high school is to develop a legislative instrument for the pre-tertiary education law, which President Akufo-Addo passed in 2020, which has already made free senior high school law under Section 3. Once that LI is developed, because education is a system, okay, and not silos, you can't just go and do one law for secondary education. Very well that to have implications for basic education, at least when it comes to resource equity. And so what happens is that if you are using the pre-tertiary education law as a point of departure to design an operational legal framework, that LI, if it's discussing or if it's making provision for funding norms, will look at kindergartens, will look at primary, will look at secondary, will look at TVET, because all these rights are provided for under the pre-tertiary education law Act 1049, which President Akufo-Addo passed. So I will continue to urge the government that they should rather invest their energy in developing an LI for the pre-tertiary education law, so that every provision that is there will the relationship of every provision to the other subsectors of the pre-tertiary sector would have been fleshed out within the context of that particular law. Other than that, you are going to have a silo-based lawmaking process where the secondary education law will be standing there, having various implications for basic education, for early childhood education, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, I mean, and Reverend Osu, I've heard Nat, particularly yourself, articulate several proposals on what you want to see in a free SHS review. This is a very unique period because politicians tend to listen more when they are approaching elections. You have just over 4 months to go. What are these proposals that you have, and what do you want to see changed about the free SHS as it currently is?
Well, Evans, I think we have already made our points, known that there is a need for us to, as a nation, to have a broader stakeholders consultation to look at, one, the sustainability of the policy, and then the funding, the feeding challenges, the infrastructure deficits, the furniture deficits, then the shortage of logistics for the teachers to enable them to do their work. See, and then as the minister want to bring the proposed bill, you know, even teachers who are coming from the universities and the colleges of education, they are now coming on a specialized basis. We have teachers who are studying junior high curriculum at the College of Education. We have teachers who are doing early childhood education. And then we have teachers who are also studying secondary education. So if he's suggesting that he's going to decouple junior high and merge it with secondary, the teachers who are specialized in junior high, why is he going to take them? Evans, where are we placing the teachers who are specialized in junior high curriculum to teach the children? If you decouple and there is no more junior high, those teachers, thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of them, where are you going to put them? Are you going to give them a refresher course to now migrate them from junior high to secondary education? So I think what we need, nobody is against the free secondary school. And let me say that currently, the Ghanaians who have social contract with whichever government will never allow any party to come to power and say that we are not in agreement with the free secondary school, so we are collapsing it or we are stopping it. Nobody will allow it. But you see, we've seen the positive side of the free secondary school, and we've also seen the negative side of the policy. There is a need for us to address the negative side that is comforting us. That is all that we are expecting the policy formulators to be heading towards, and bringing the experts together How can we solve the feeding challenge? How can we solve the lack of textbooks? How can we solve, now you go to secondary school, students do not have beds to sleep on. The result of the free secondary school, including the category A secondary schools in Ghana.
Yeah.
They don't have beds to sleep on.
Go to typicals.
Typicals. You come to Accra, you go to Kumasi, the category A schools, the children are sharing bed, not desks, bed. Some are even sleeping on the floor. So these are the real challenges that, how can we solve these challenges? It is not a matter of, if we don't bring a new law, somebody will come and then cancel it. We are not Ghanaians as we used to be yesterday. So the challenges confronting the pre-tertiary education, let's look at it holistically, because it is not only affecting the secondary school. You come to the basic school, which is number one, free education. Now, capitation grants, textbooks. We started implementing new curriculum since Apawaka 2019. We have not been able to supply all the textbooks.
Still? I thought that was already been dealt with.
We have not been able to supply all the textbooks. All. Now the common core at the junior high, as I'm talking to you, GES is now distributing textbooks.
3 after 3 years.
Yes, now, so these are the reality that is facing us, confronting us. It's not a matter of bringing a new law to stop Party A. When it comes to power, you can't touch it.
I mean, the point you just made about the textbooks, in the basic school scenario, which textbooks are still outstanding?
Well, so far they've been able to supply the core subjects, which is the English, Maths, Integrated, and the others, about 5 out of the 8.
Okay. Professor Adai, this is fundamentally a funding challenge. If you have the money, you can print faster, the textbooks will be available. Isn't it prudent to have a law that defines very clearly the source of funding, and then also defines and compels government to allocate a certain percentage every year of its annual budget to fund the free SHS in a way that doesn't allow governments to undercut depending on the prevailing circumstance? Wouldn't that be a prudent thing to do?
I don't think that that's a legislative issue, because already in the economics or in the public finance, we have a lot of rigidities in our budgetary system already. Certain proportion to go to local governments, certain proportion to go to get fund, certain proportion to go to health services, and they are not being followed. So having another legislation to say that certain proportion should go to senior high and junior high, it is a question of resource mobilization and allocation. And no matter what, if there's no money, you can take them to court. I think that all these issues are not legal issues. We have get fund, yes, some money goes there, but hey, it has been capped. There has been a lot of challenges. I wouldn't, as a development economist, recommend further rigidities in our budgetary system. If we do, basically, we are getting to a point whereby there's no need of a government. We have a fundamental challenge that our governments are not performing, and we try to solve it by this legislative allocate this proportion, and eventually they don't do it. There's a backlog. It's a question of efficient management of the economy. And these are not legislative solutions.
Prof, what would you change about free SHS as it is currently?
Well, there has not changed. Improve. I believe that in this day and age, no child should be denied education to the senior secondary school level. So it's not a changing of it, but how to improve it. Number one, the reality is that no country in the world trains all his children in boarding schools, which is a legacy, a colonial legacy. And unfortunately, we moved from Castle to Jubilee House and still practice what Georgesburg left us. By this time, every locality with about, say, 5 junior high schools should have in the midst of them a senior high school, not a gargantuan building, but one that serves the 5 or so secondary schools with all that is needed, like the school, the classrooms, because the children can come as a day school. They must have the proper classroom, the laboratories. The teachers are those who must be taken care of. They must stay on the campus, have the facilities, internet, and everything else, and the wherewithal to teach them. And in saying this, I'm sorry that I have to say that I put my energy where my mouth is. In my village, Ramwasi, we have a free secondary school that serves 15 senior high schools. Of course, we cannot take all of them, junior high school rather. And for the past 6 years, we have returned better results percentage-wise of student passing than Wegehe and Achimota. And the reason is that is within the locality, we provide accommodation for every teacher with water, electricity, internet. And there's a lab. So you can't say that you are there, you are going to have a few STEM schools, but we have 10. 10 for the whole country is what? Every child who can do science must have opportunity to do it. So once they do science, they pass, you go to take, they are in the medical school, they are doing geophysics and other things. And so there's a need to look at it, not so much legislatively, as to how we are going to make it feasible within national resource means for everybody to have quality senior secondary school. Then the feeding issue can be addressed. Of course, if we were feeding everybody lunch, you can afford a free, but when some people are having 3 square meals and someone doesn't practically get any, there's no equity. Again, there have been a lot of suggestions as to the possibility of varying. Of course, one is there are some parents who want to contribute and say you won't accept it. There's something wrong with you. Of course, it's free secondary school, but if people, let me tell you that when my son went to tech, and I decided, and I was in Gimpa, not that I was overseas, that I can afford my son's school fees and that he should go for a fee paying. While being a rector, my best friend, childhood friend, was the head of the institution in tech, Professor Andam. In fact, I gave him the forms for my son to go and submit them. And I said, I've written on it, he's going to be a fee paying. He said, Steve, what do you mean? I said, he'll be a fee paying. And I paid for 4 years of my son's education before free secondary school, of course, in tech, because I believe that I should not put it on the state to look after my child. So there are modalities we should look at. And this idea of making policy a doctrine, this is what we are doing, that's how we do it. And that is Ghanaian politics. When the NDC takes one position, MPP goes this way, when MPP goes this way, and they won't change it. And we are suffering.
Yeah. Prof, thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts on this. Also, Kofi Asare and Reverend Owusu. This is a conversation that you can bet we'll have to return to as this goes through Cabinet for consideration and subsequently to Parliament. Enjoy the rest of your evening.